We've seen those giant helicarriers from the Marvel Universe or the Prydwen from Fallout 4. They can carry, launch, retrieve, and support other smaller aircraft. But are there really plans to build a flying aircraft carrier like this? Both the Brits and the Americans were convinced to give constructing such an aircraft a go after seeing Germany have a degree of success with the Zeppelins during the Great War. Sadly, for fans of warfare, airships lack the maneuverability required to make them efficient bombers. But the Navy had the foresight to propose using them for other means. Back then, the Brits were still arrogant enough to have an empire and were toying with the idea of connecting all the countries within that empire with airship routes. To this end, they constructed two sizable helium-filled airships, and one of them made a successful trip all the way to Canada and back. But sometimes things can end up going disastrously wrong, and the other airship crashed on its way to Karachi. The U.S. Navy's own experimentation with the idea was the Akron-class airship, the only flying aircraft carrier put into actual service. The Akron class was like the newest Star Wars trilogy, promising at first, but the project ultimately fell apart. These carriers had severe limitations that led to a pair of sizable accidents. This saw the carrier fleet destroyed, prompting the entire concept to be dropped. The Akron was first built in the late 1920s and was designed much like conventional seagoing aircraft carriers to reconnoiter the seas as they searched for the enemy's fleet. From here, the battleships would close with the enemy and ultimately defeat them. The two Akron airships designed, dubbed Akron and Macon, were ordered in 1926 and commissioned into service in 1931 and 1933, respectively. They were a classically shaped interwar airship with a rigid skin made of aluminum and cloth, filled to the brim with helium. They were absolute beasts of machines, being a whopping 785 feet longer than a Tennessee-class battleship, and requiring 8 Maybach 12-cylinder engines, putting out a combined 6,700 horsepower. The Akron carried fixed-wing aircraft and was able to both launch and recover them in flight and was twice as fast as surface ships, so by all accounts, it should have been the perfect machine. So what went wrong? Both Akron and Macon struggled when up against tumultuous weather with high winds, rendering both carriers tricky to steer. Trouble hit February of 1932 when winds ripped Akron away from its handlers mere seconds before a group of visiting congressmen was waiting to board. And then, little more than 3 later in San Diego, 2 unfortunate sailors were thrown off the airship, and a third was badly injured in a botched attempt to moor the ship to the ground. Come April 3, 1933, yet more bad things came Akron's way. A mission to calibrate its radio equipment just off the coast of New Jersey saw the troubled airship running into its biggest problem yet. An epic surge of strong winds saw the Akron plunge a devastating 1,000 feet in mere seconds. In the panic of the moment, the crew was forced to make a tough decision and chose to dump the water ballast in a desperate attempt to regain altitude. This would prove to be a horrific error of judgment. It caused the airship to rise far too quickly, and the crew completely lost control, crashing into the depths of the ocean below. And just 2 years later, it was the Macon that came head-to-head with trouble. In the midst of flying over the Pacific Ocean, a mighty storm caused the upper fin to fail completely, and in the process, the ship lost 20% of its helium, prompting the ship to rise at a devastatingly rapid rate. In a desperate but doomed attempt to remain airborne, the crew released additional helium to make the airship dip back down. But too much was released too rapidly, and the ship swiftly crashed into the dark depths of the waters below. The Macon plunged into the depths of the Pacific on February 12th of 1935, and remarkably, it was only recently found. A Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute research ship, that's a mouthful, deployed a remotely operated vehicle into the area surrounding the site and managed to capture high-definition still images and video of the historic wreckage. Visible in the airship's hangar bay, which still contains 4 Sparrowhawk biplanes, as well as 5 of the ship's 12 gasoline engines and many objects from the vessel's gallery. Among them are propane tanks and sections from an aluminum stone. It's not quite the treasure you would find with the Titanic, though there's an argument to be had that the contents are just as historic if not as valuable. The precise location of the submerged aircraft eluded experts for almost 5 decades until it was stumbled upon, of all people, by a humble fisherman. He snagged a piece of the Macon's girder in his net, and oblivious to what he had found, because this video didn't exist for him to watch and learn back then, he decided to get the peculiar object displayed as little more than an intriguing trinket for a local seafood restaurant. All the while, those experts were struggling to pinpoint the wreckage because the objects they were looking for weren't at the recorded sinking location. But hearing about that girder alerted them to the fact that they may have been looking in the wrong place, and soon they were able to relocate their efforts and find the missing Macon. Because of these many and lethal failures, the idea of flying aircraft carriers was dropped, existing only between the First and Second World Wars and never coming into fruition in the time since. It's interesting to hypothesize what might have happened if the program had not ended. Would airships be commonplace? Has it been long enough now that we should consider bringing them back? Expert in the field, Kyle Mizokami, is keen to see airships make a comeback, arguing that the necessary technology already exists for unmanned airships to team up with UAVs to provide modern-day equivalents of the Akron-class airships. But could and should are two very different things. But Mizokami needs to learn a lesson from Frozen's Elsa because he just will not let the idea go. On another occasion, he wrote, "A high-flying airship equipped with sensors and networking capabilities could reach its destination faster than a seaborne aircraft carrier and remain on station for days or weeks at a time. The airship could carry a battery of several dozen unmanned aerial vehicles, each equipped with radar, electro-optical, and other sensors, to extend the sensor reach of the mothership, and hence the surface fleet. Those same drones could pack a variety of weapons for use against ships, submarines, lower performance aircraft such as helicopter, and targets on land." He's also insisted that they could augment traditional surface warships, providing Navy fleets with a new layer of distributed lethality. Aircraft carriers could offer up the unprecedented ability to screen large swatches of the ocean at a time, which could be extraordinarily helpful when it comes to protecting one's country from enemy attack. Though there are, of course, arguments against, one expert is quoted as saying in regards to the topic, "We would want to minimize the weight and cost of a flying helicarrier itself in order to maximize the number and capability of the aircraft that could be carried on it," the Navy official said. "The number and size of the thrusters required to lift the carrier, the number and size of the engines to drive them, and the fuel to keep the engines running, etc., all make this system unrealistic." Sadly for the likes of Mizokami, the reality is it is far more expensive to fly than it is to float. Swimming to France is cheaper than getting on a plane. An aircraft carrier designed with any form of flight assistance, such as wings, would require significant amounts of power for the thrusters in both forward airborne flight and lifting mode. But if the design is the issue, could we look to the aforementioned helicarrier from Marvel movies as inspiration? After all, many modern real-life gadgets were once prototypes based on fictional gizmos from Star Trek. Nick Fury's fictional helicarrier seems to use ducted rotors for its vertical takeoff and landing, which isn't actually all that far from how real Navy aircraft such as the AV-8B Harrier fighter jet and the V-22 Osprey work. So the Marvel movies do seem to be in sync with the reality of technology, suggesting a modern-day aircraft carrier that dodges the design issue could be possible. But sadly, this type of ducted rotor is also the most expensive air transport option for the US military, meaning it would cost an absolute arm and a leg to bring SHIELD's flying base into the real world. The modern military is not funded in the way it once was, and their budget would likely burst building such a thing. So, will America build them again? It seems fanciful. They seem to be the work of science fiction, and the cost could be astronomical. But flying aircraft carriers may go back into construction sooner than you think. For half a decade now, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, often called DARPA by people who are too busy, has been hard at work building a prototype flying aircraft carrier capable of launching and recovering drone aircraft. Sadly for DARPA, two other companions beat them to the finish: AeroVironment and Kratos Defense and Security. For a long time now, AeroVironment has been the cream of the crop when it comes to military drone production, while Kratos Defense and Security have been making waves as the biggest name in jet-powered weaponized combat drone for the Air Force. These two companies decided to take the Beatles' advice and come together, creating a system of remotely piloted drones that could launch other drones from mid-air. It's in the same area as DARPA's project. The question with no known answers as of yet is, will it prompt DARPA to give up on their own project? At the very least, what it does showcase is that modern remixes on the idea of flying aircraft carriers already exist. More may be to come. Do you think we, not us specifically, Experts, should we turn to building flying aircraft carriers? Or would we be better off making modern variations such as the aforementioned drone project? Let us know in the comments. And if you like the video, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to know when a new video arrives. Thanks for watching.